we need to talk about the Championship because, and League One to an extent, because we've got a few issues going on in Rugby League at the minute. I was taken to task on Twitter last week for not giving enough time to talk over the Swinton thing. I think I gave it enough time that it deserved. Because why do we need to spend hours and hours and hours talking about a club which gets an average of however many people watching them? We may as well spend 4 hours talking about Hunslet, who in their big final game of the season, or potential final game of the season, got a crowd of 332.
How pathetic is that?
You know, and it's not knocking the people who go, it's not knocking the clubs, it's knocking the fact that as a sport we're almost held back.
Well, the two games, it's Newcastle and Doncaster that are working to 1,000 a crowd. 2 games, 1,000. Absolutely pathetic.
You know,
I think the Swinton debate is interesting because changing the name on its own is not a panacea that people are suddenly going to wake up and go, because it's Manchester, I'm going to go. You have to have investment in your players. So, you know, Swinton have spent most of this season, they finished it really strongly, which is their credit, but they did spend most of the season battling against relegation. Yeah. So changing the name of the club is not going to alter that. Change the name of the club and add 5 or 6 signings that make you a potential top 5 challenger next year. I can understand that. The two need to go together. Otherwise, it's more of just a cosmetic exercise. I think the directors have every right to do whatever they think is necessary to change the fortunes of the club. I think the one thing I am slightly surprised about is there was always going to be some resistance to this name change. There was always going to be a core of supporters who were going to say, well, Swinton will always be Swinton, we've got the history and heritage of Swinton, even though we don't play in Swinton anymore, it's the name, it's the colours, it's what used to be Station Road, and if you're going to take that away from us, we're going to be upset about that. Now, that is no excuse for abuse on social media, and we've talked about that with a number of clubs and people. We are in a horrible part of the world at the moment where people just feel as though, you know, Neil Hodgson has come out this week and said that some of the abuse he's had for keeping Hull KR going is totally unwarranted, and I agree 1,000,000% with that Andy Maisie, who has kept Swinton going, should not be subject to any abuse. But I just think the ease with which the directors have said, okay, well, you know, because I had abuse, we're not going to do it, when they must have expected some resistance, is a little bit of a worry for me.
I mean, here's some interesting quotes from Andy Maisie in today's League Express, story by Gareth Walker. Here's the one that springs straight out of here. An online petition was launched, and within 12 hours there was between 500 and 1,000 names on it. And those people who obviously don't care enough to go watch this team week in, week out. I spoke to Karen Morehouse and Ralph Rimmer, I've heard of those, of the RFL. This isn't a case of splitting the dummy and running away. All the directors have resigned bar Steve Wald, who is a paid employee of the club, and he will stay on and able to enable the transition of the club to the next owners. I will strip the budget right down so the club isn't reliant on myself and the directors' investment, because I don't want to see the club come to any harm. You know and I know, and anyone watching this programme who's got half a brain knows, all these sporting clubs, be it football, rugby league, rugby union, whatever, rely heavily, for the most part, on benevolent people who made loads of money and want to throw it at professional sport for whatever reasons, altruistic or not. And it's not as if owning Swinton is going to make you into some kind of mega celebrity or get you the adulation of hundreds of thousands of people.
I would go back to the fact that Wigan have just announced a loss of £1.4 million. They're the current defending champions. London, who've been back in Super League this year, for last season when they won promotion into Super League, made a loss of £1.6 million. So, you know, clearly, whatever Andy Mays putting into Swinton is going to keep them alive. I wouldn't question his motives for one moment. I think he's done a fantastic job to keep them a mid-table championship team. But it's almost as if at the first sign of resistance or opposition, of which there was always going to be some, we'd rather withdraw and leave somebody else to do it. Something there, for me, doesn't quite balance.
I just don't know where we go as a sport
Well, I think you raise an interesting
with
issue
teams
there,
like Swinton.
because this is the wider issue that we've spoken about on a number of occasions about what do we want Super League to look like? What do we need it to look like for a broadcaster to invest in the sport at least the level they're investing in at the moment? And then you bring in this whole thing about Toronto, where Robert Elston in his comments today in the build-up to the playoffs is saying it isn't 100% certain that Toronto have got the green light to come into Super League, that there's still due diligence. How can there still be due diligence?
Exactly.
The playoffs have started. You know, this time last year when Toronto were in a similar position, they were fighting for a place in Super League, they were given the green light. So what has changed? You cannot, as a credible sport, whether it be Swinton changing their name to Manchester or Toronto being on the verge of a chance of being in Super League, and say 3 games out from that, we're not sure we're going to let you in. So does that mean that London are being told, keep all your players together because you're not being
And they
relegated?
can only get reprieve.
Are Toulouse being told,
Well,
if you finish second, you might go up because we don't have the same doubts? As a fan, whether it's of Swinton or Wigan or Toronto or Dewsbury, when the sport itself can't make the tough decisions, why would you want to own a club? Why would you want to support a club? Why would you want to buy a season ticket? We need to decide what we are, what we want to be, what we're trying to be, what we can be with the resources we've got. And again, I go back to something we discussed for nearly 2 years on this programme. We've got a full-time element with some owners who are prepared to back their teams, perhaps uneconomically, but they want to be full-time and they can provide the resource to be full-time. And we've got part-time teams. Now, Swinton quite clearly fit into one model and not the other at the moment, and the game itself has to find something meaningful for each of those halves of the game to play. So the 1895 Cup is a step in the right direction. Next year, Swinton or Manchester can plan to be at Wembley if they're good enough to get there. We need to have a championship final for part-time teams that ends up at a venue, maybe like Headingley, with 15,000, 20,000 people there, promote the hell out of it, and the winners get £250,000, which will pay for at least one more season. But it doesn't necessarily have to lead to promotion. And I don't think we're discussing any of these things. One of the other things, without monopolising the conversation, and we probably should get some feedback in a minute, is what the other thing that's been confirmed by Rob Elson is we've got loop fixtures again next year. Well, when is the game going to come to the reality of the fact that what's turning fans off at the moment, that one of the reasons why Wigan have made a loss of £1.4 million is that people won't go and watch the same fixture 3 or 4 times. We don't want the season to start at the end of January. Scarcity breeds more interest, and more people will go and watch. And I think it's a false economy to say we've got to have a minimum of 14 home fixtures. If you only have maybe 12 or 11, and you market the hell out of them, if you don't go and watch Wakefield and Wigan this week, you won't see that fixture again. That's what we've got to do. And I'm not sure we're addressing any of those issues. You know, as you say, if Toronto do get the green light, somebody might be going there twice next year in the regular season. They might be going to Toronto twice, they might be going to Catalan twice. It's just, as a fan, you can't plan what you used to be able to do. We need to work it out.
Peter says no, Toronto, they will not bring anybody. Well, we may as well invite the women's team into Super League then, because they'd bring a lot of people.
But it's nothing to do with what they bring. What they've got at home is between 8,000 and 10,000 fans that we currently don't have.
And you dare say that the amount of fans Toronto took to Bradford a few weeks ago is probably more than some of the teams at the bottom end of the Championship took to Bradford this year.
They took more than some Super League teams take to away games. But if you can't market... See, again, the counter to that is, what did York do when they played Toronto last year? They made it a massive event. You know, Toronto don't come to York very often. There's a lot of people that have got business interests here in Canada. We'll approach them. We'll actually market the fixture as being unique and different. And they got, what, 3,500 people there?
Well, it's like on Friday after the game, I was on TalkSport 2 doing the updates, and I was asked about losing London out of Super League, because Mark's been on and said before, you know, they are losing out a lot geographically. And I made 2 points. One, it's not as if Rugby Union's massively geographically bigger than us, it's just they've got 2 northern outposts in Sale, and which is not really in Sale, and Newcastle. And the teams that could be replacing them, this was the big point I made, could be Toronto, could be Toulouse. But we can keep the sport within these boundaries, and we can have a sport where people moan about Thursday night fixtures because they can't get to a game an hour away on the motorway, and
forget that an hour away on the motorway, 3 hours on the motorway.
But we used to have midweek games 20, 30 years ago, and people didn't moan.
The whole principle of Super League, when it was brought in, which changed the face of the sport and brought in a level of finance that we haven't had since, and we're still desperate for, was a model whereby Maurice Lindsay, for all he was laughed at, said we're going to be playing in Paris and Milan and Barcelona, and the idea was one of expansion and extending the footprint of the sport. And by losing London, which I think is massively strategically important for the sport in terms of its profile, we've lost Wales, we've lost Sheffield, we've lost Gateshead. You look at Paris originally. You look at all the places we've been to where we could have extended the interest in the sport as a whole, and we butchered it. Now we've got a chance to maybe make that right, and we're all saying, oh well,